Part 105. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1043. The incident was too big, and Chi Heiran and Fan Zijian couldn't end it for a while. The main reason was that there were too many people watching. It was impossible for them to get the children home quietly, and it was obviously not in line with their idea to do it openly. Zhou Zhihu and the others were furious. They didn't believe that Fan Zijian and Chi Heiran would know nothing about it. They already believed in their hearts that the two of them ordered their children to do it. It's simply too despicable for an adult to take advantage of a child without showing up. Everyone didn't give them a good look. Fan Zijian didn't want to be outraged by the public, and felt that the children were doing something wrong, so he endured it aggrievedly. But Chi Heiran was different. Since he was young, there were no more than 3 people who were willing to let him act according to his face. A group of tax evaders, people who dared to show him face. Chi Heiran stared back confidently, making his attitude clear. Which sentence did the children say wrong, and which step did they do wrong? Point it out, he admits, he didn't say anything wrong, he didn't do anything wrong, so who was the one who made the mistake? The generals were stared back one by Chi Heiran, but they felt guilty and turned their heads away. Chi Heiran snorted coldly, and left with Fei Bai. Go back to Wang Fei, let her find a way to bring the young masters home. Chi Heiran thought of Fan Zijian on the way, and turned his horse to go to the government office to look for him. Seeing that all the officials along the way had stern faces, their brows frowned. After entering the hall, he saw Zhou Zhihu dare to snort at Fan Zijian, and suddenly became angry. Swelling up, he was so angry that he kicked a chair flying, and the chair hit the wall, and the fragments rubbed Zhou Zhihu's cheek and inserted into the big pillar on his left. How ran, Fan Zijian yelled violently, stopping his movements. Military generals are not particular, he is fine in the barracks, but the civil servants are very fragile. If he dares to do something to the civil servants today, tomorrow he will be drowned by the civil servants' saliva. Zhou Zhihu's legs trembled, his eyes widened angrily, he pointed at Chi Heiran, speechless. Chi Heiran pushed Fan Zijian aside, and said with a sneer, "Why, Zhou Zhihu's tax evasion is justified. Aren't you just responsible for collecting taxes, and you don't even obey the law, so what right do you have to collect taxes from the people?" Zhou Zhihu hesitated, and said, "My lord, Mr. Fan and I are discussing the children's education, not business matters." Chi Heiran grinned grimly, then the king's kick should have been more appropriate. "What time is it now? What is the place here? I don't talk about official business, but I talk about private matters. This is still the case when Master Fan is here. Then Master Fan, what about when you're not around?" Zhou Zhihu's lips trembled, and said, "Then the prince has no right to use force against subordinate officials, to use lynching." "Yo, this is a lynching. Tell me, where did you get hurt?" Fan Zijian hurriedly stopped Chi Heiran, turned around and said solemnly, "Master Zhou, that's just a child's nonsense. If you can't see it, you can call someone to take Mr. Ling back. Do you think he didn't go to pick someone up? I don't know what kind of ecstasy those young masters gave his son. As soon as his servants picked him up, he yelled. The tiger head and the little lion rushed up and dragged his son, yelling he yelled, saying that his family's servants were going to steal the child, and they were going to turn it over and send it to the government. The onlookers were afraid that the world would not be chaotic, so they not only blocked the way of the family members, but also helped arrest them, but his son stood by them, waving his fists and calling for the official, which made him fall backwards in anger. Otherwise, he wouldn't lose his temper with Fan Zijian. Chi Heiran sneered in his heart when he saw Zhou Zhihu bullying the weak and afraid of the hard-working. No wonder such a person was always suppressed by the later Yan Zhihu. He really had no ability. Fan Zijian was really afraid that Chi Heiran and Zhou Zhihu would have another conflict, so he hurriedly pulled people away. "You are too impulsive, is it so easy to be criticized by literati? Grandfather Daejeon is not so pleasant. Fan Zijan couldn't help but gave him a nod on the head. You still think this is when you were a child and you couldn't fight? Let me go home. Chi Heiran pursed his lips, and followed Fan Zijan displeasedly. He was in a bad mood, so he stopped riding a horse, and got into the carriage to sit with Fan Zijan. When the carriage reached Kinmen Street, it couldn't move anymore. Chi Heiran opened the curtain, and Fei Bai stepped forward and said, "Master, there are a few young masters in front, there are all people there, it's impossible to get through, why don't we make a detour?" Chi Heiran put down the curtain, "Let's go. It's better for him not to watch, otherwise things will get worse." The carriage turned a corner. The shop here had obviously not been inspected by a few children. Some people were standing at the door looking forward to it. Some people closed the shop directly, but some even prepared tax receipts and waited eagerly. "Come, the child, so that I may get a little red flour. I didn't think it before, but now I feel that it is really honorable to pay taxes, and a small red flower is hung on the door, and the business will directly increase by 30%. Anyone who has paid the tax is looking forward to this group of children." The children were so popular that it was already dark when they returned home. When they returned to the dining room, talking and laughing, they found that the adults of both families were sitting and waiting for them. The 4 children immediately shut their mouths tightly, and stood in the front row one after another, waiting for the lecture. Fan Zijan stared at them, took a breath and was about to get angry when Mu Yangling spoke first. "You're thirsty, drink some water before talking." The 4 children were really thirsty after talking all day, so they turned around and ran to drink water. Fan Zijan's face turned red. He knew that Chi Heiran would definitely refuse to stare at Mu Yangling, so he went straight to stare at Chi Heiran, and even stretched out his foot to stomp on his foot. Chi Heiran jumped up with an "ah," and met the eyes of "What's the matter with you?" He pursed the corner of his mouth, continued to do it, and waved, "It's okay, you continue." Fan Zijan put down the teacup unceremoniously, forced the children to stand still with his eyes, and asked, "Do you know that you have caused trouble?" The 4 children shook their heads together, and Fan Zijan pointed to Little Xiong and said, "Little Xiong, tell them what they did wrong." Little Bear looked blank. "Second uncle, I don't know what's wrong with my brothers." Fan Zijan got angry. "You think they did a good job as co-authors, don't you?" Little Bear lowered his head and muttered, "I didn't do anything wrong, it's obviously a reasonable thing to do." Mu Yangling nodded repeatedly. "Yes, Zijan, what did the children do wrong?" "Exposing tax evasion and tax evasion, put it in the previous life, that is a hero who can report, what can be wrong with a few children?" Fan Zijan fell backward in anger, and Chi Heiran touched Mu Yangling's toes, telling her not to provoke Fan Zijan anymore. Fan Zijan took a deep breath, kicked the children out, and said earnestly to Mu Yangling, "Aling, I know you are upright, which is a good thing, but some things are not legal and reasonable, but reasonable. Only a scholar can be exempted from his own small tax, and a scholar can be exempted from the family's land tax, let alone an official. This has become a law that has been agreed upon after the establishment of successive dynasties. Although the land tax can still be exempted, but the quantity is strictly defined, the situation forced it back then, and the emperor's attitude was firm, and the literati had no choice but to accept it. Just like this law, the law that officials are not allowed to do business is also a customary rule, but similarly, it is also a customary rule that officials use the hands of others or servants to manage business. As long as you take their posts, it is not less paying taxes means exempting taxes. These customary rules cannot be declared, but everyone must abide by them. Now, we want to break this rule. This cannot be achieved by a single decree from the emperor. We have to work out it slowly." Fan Zijan said earnestly, "I know that tax evasion is illegal, who doesn't know? It's very easy to deal with them, Just take the account books and go to force those shops to pay taxes, and then what happens after paying? Officials enter the local government treasury, and then escort them all the way back to Beijing from the government treasury, and then enter the national treasury. There are too many things to do along the way, Aling, we can't force them to turn from tax evasion to greed. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1044. Mu Yangling's face was a little ugly, just to be less greedy and sit back and watch them evade taxes. Isn't this drinking poison to quench thirst? Seeing that the couple's faces were equally ugly, Fan Zijin sighed, I know you won't be able to accept it for a while, but this is the truth. Daki's situation is much better than it has been in previous dynasties. Fart, Mu Yangling couldn't help but explode. Officials not only have salary, silver, and lumi, but also official land. The salary is so rich that they can support 10 families, not to mention one family. Why should they be greedy? If it was the Ming dynasty, officials could still use the excuse of low salaries for corruption, and then the salaries of officials in Daki were extremely generous. The salary of civil servants in her previous life was more than 10 times higher, and she couldn't find a reason for corruption at all. The salary of eating the emperor, the matter of being loyal to the emperor, and thinking about money and silver, it is better to go into business. Why come to be an official, wanting fame and status, but also holding on to money and wealth? It is simply a spring and autumn dream. Seeing that she was breathing heavily from anger, Chi Heiran hurriedly supported her. Don't be angry, and be careful of the children in your stomach. If they take bribes and break the law, they will be punished according to the law. It's not worth your anger. Fan Zijin shook his head. It's not that simple. Don't mess around and offend more people. Those aristocratic families and civil servants have been holding their breath because the emperor cut off a lot of their benefits. At this time, if something goes wrong, it will detonate. Well, you have never been criticized by civil servants. Didn't Emperor Shizong of the Great Zhou mention the taxation of official land? It ended up being buried in the papers of civil servants, and finally nothing happened. If it happened that Dajin came to commit the crime, it would definitely not be over. Fan Zijin said, it's those civil servants who won't end up with Emperor Xizong. Their mouths are so powerful. Officials in the world listen to the orders of civil officials, and the people are ignorant. They are fooled by a few words. We can't compete. Chi Heiran didn't believe it. It's because you don't want to work hard to fight. Fan Zijin complained, one punch is hard to beat 4 legs, and the same is true for a fight of words. With just one mouth, can I win against the civil and military of the Manchu dynasty? Can you beat thousands of troops by yourself? Chi Heiran was choked. Mu Yangling gritted his teeth and sneered, of course one person can't beat the civil and military forces of the Manchu dynasty. In the same way, the civil and military forces of the Manchu dynasty can't defeat tens of thousands of people. Isn't it just a comparison of saliva? Then I will let the saliva drown them. Chi Heiran and Fan Zijin felt awkward, and had to remind, Aling, who else in this world can speak more eloquently than a civil servant? Mu Yangling snorted coldly, of course it's a scholar, of course it's a common man in the market. What I dislike the most is arguing, but since they like it, I'll give it to them. I've decided. I want to run a newspaper. She is not good at talking, but there are always people in this world who are good at it. Aren't those civil servants just relying on their mouths to say that they can compare black to white, and white to black? She finds some people to play with them. Thanks to the open environment provided by Emperor Xizong, the people have a high degree of freedom of speech, and everyone will definitely accept it very well. In terms of guiding public opinion, what is better than newspapers? Chi Heiran and Fan Zijin were confused. Chi Heiran pondered for a while, and asked hesitantly, you mean you want to run a residence newspaper? The daibao is something that the imperial court issues to officials. What am I doing with that? And I'm not qualified. What I want to do is private, and it's only for ordinary people to borrow and buy. Looking at his confident wife, Chi Heiran couldn't help but said, Aling, 9.5 out of 10 people in this world can't read, how many people can buy this newspaper? Mu Yangling glanced at him sideways, and said, this matter is not about business, but about venting anger. Don't you have a storyteller who is illiterate? Provide them with storytelling topics for nothing, and they are happy. Fan Zijian rubbed his chin, counted the audience in his mind, and said, in this way, there are indeed more people participating, and each person's words can indeed drown those civil servants, but if one person can't control it well, I'm afraid it will cause riots. After all, the common people hate greed and cruelty the most, and it is very dangerous to lead everyone to discuss here. If there is someone with a heart to provoke, I am afraid that the Yamen will be besieged. Mu Yangling gave him a disdainful look. I stripped it off for everyone to see without saying anything, not to mention ordinary people, even a person like me who has gone through wind and rain can't bear it, so I will dress one by one. Let them peel it off, and continue when they can accept it, and they will always tear off the last fig leaf. Fan Zijian blushed. Chi Heiran coughed lightly, and said in a low voice, Aling, be more reserved. Are these words a girl can say? Mu Yangling glared at him and said, you just say yes or no. Fan Zijian was helpless. If we don't agree, will you stop doing it? No, Mu Yangling said firmly. That's all right, we have to promise or promise. Xiao Xia looked left and right, finally looked at Mu Yangling, and said weakly, Aling, is there anything I can do to help? Yes, Mu Yangling said, I don't need anything, but I am short of people. See if there are any redundant people in your dowry, and choose a few for me. This matter needs to be considered in the long term. Fan Zijian looked at her belly and said, let's wait until you give birth to the child. It requires recruitment, opening of restaurants, and the requirement to spread it all over Daki. It can be done within a year and a half, and coincidentally, although the resetting of the commercial tax has set the tone, it is impossible to win it in 3 or 2 years, so we are not in a hurry. Mu Yangling squinted at him triumphantly, a year and a half? I can do it in a month, and the article can be written directly by scholars or some people of insight, as long as the outline is okay, and then the recent government decree, corrupt officials seized, relatively serious criminal cases, and some anecdotes from various places were sorted out and handed over to bookstores. After printing, they were sent to bookstores, academies, schools, tea houses, and various yamen. 1 month is enough. Succeed. Fan Zijian and Chi Heiran opened their mouths wide. Mu Yangling said triumphantly, if it weren't for the inconvenient transportation and the long travel time, this time can be shortened. You know, my bookstore is like a grain store, spread all over Daki, and printing newspapers is not a word. It's about words. Fan Zijian and Chi Heiran closed their mouths, and said dryly, why are bookstores opening all over Daki? No way. Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang's wish is to open Baoxiang Academy all over Daki. In order to buy books at a low price, they can only ask me to open bookstores all over Daki. Anyway, there are students everywhere who want to study, and bookstores are needed to buy books. The cost of opening a bookstore is not high, and you can open a bookstore by saving some travel expenses, so I agreed. Should they also thank the 2 bear children for their great ambition? Chi Heiran and Fan Zijian looked at each other, and felt that things seemed to be getting worse and worse. They promised Mu Yangling to run a newspaper to guide public opinion, but that was on the premise that it would be done in a year and a half. Isn't it obvious that the conflict is intensified? The two couldn't help touching their foreheads, and apologized to Chi Ziyuan in their hearts. They seemed to have ruined the big brothers, big cousin, plan. Would they be drawn? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 1045. Fan Zijin couldn't convince Mu Yangling, so naturally he couldn't control the children. At dawn, the four boys got up and started to continue their great cause. However, all the children led by them yesterday were grounded. The Enlightenment class of the academy asked for leave collectively after skipping classes collectively. Seeing this, the head of the academy simply gave the Enlightenment class a 3-day vacation, so as not to keep receiving leave notes to approve the leave. The senior students were envious, and secretly wondered, if they also went to the streets with the 4 young masters of the palace, would they also be able to have a holiday? Si Xiao stood alone at the entrance of the academy. Xiaoan said, "We can't pin all our hopes on others." Hudu scratched his head, "Then we go by ourselves." The little lion glanced at him contemptuously. "Brother Xiaoan said that we want to rescue our partners, how can we abandon them? It's too disrespectful." How to save? Qi Wensu looked at the 3 brothers. The tiger head had a flash of inspiration: climb the wall. The 4 children gathered together to discuss the rescue of their little friends, and their little friends were also fighting for their ideals. The ones who were favored rolled all over the floor and asked the adults to pay taxes. The child cried, "Your adults let us do it, good boy, we are going to be good boys who obey the law now, but you stop us again, can we still be good boys?" The sensible child stood in front of the adults rationally and said, "You are evading taxes now, and you are not good people. What if I grow up and follow your laws and disciplines? Don't call me unfilial, because I learned it all from you." Regardless of whether it is the former or the latter, they all turned their fathers into a rage, but the children are still young, the oldest is no more than 8 years old, and the reason does not make sense, so they accepted the principle of paying taxes according to the law, and beat them. The children, he simply howled, "It is right to break the law and discipline, I will learn from you in the future, you are not allowed to beat me up again." The fathers were so angry that they waved their whips, but they could not continue, for fear that they would really teach their children astray. They were reluctant to part with the money, but they didn't teach their sons badly for money. Who taught children not to teach them in a good way? No matter how bad or unfilial they are, they always teach their children to be good and to be filial. At this time, when they hear their children linking this matter with education, they really can't do it. Seeing that this trick is indeed as effective as Xiaoan said, the children are even more eager for it. Seeing the hesitation of the head of the family, the mothers hurriedly pulled the children down to comfort them. The fathers had no choice but to get together to discuss a solution. Speaking of the truth, they don't understand the overall situation. What should you say? Now the house is noisy and there is no time to stop. His who gritted his teeth when he said this. It's easy for King Rong and Master Fan to use a few young masters. Disturb our back house and let it go. His who murmured, this matter may not be ordered by the Lord Wang and Lord Fan. After all, Guangdong is under the rule of the 2 lords. It is of no benefit to push Guangdong to the forefront. His who snorted coldly, since Lu Yu went to the palace to urge taxes, King Rongjun has been on the cusp, and he took the opportunity to push Guangdong out of the wind. Master Zhou, be careful, His who interrupted him, and said in a deep voice, the most important thing at this moment is to solve this matter, we can't let it go, the children have already walked 50 steps, if we go back, not only offended the entire Daki officialdom, and also offended the emperor. His whose face was livid, of course he knew this, that's why he was even more annoyed. It was all thanks to Qi Heiran and Fan Zijin that they were in such a desperate situation. His who stroked his beard and pondered for a while, then said, since there is no way to retreat, it is better to go forward, maybe we can walk out a broad road. His who snorted coldly, obviously disapproving, the official way pays attention to stability, if you advance so aggressively, you don't know how you will die. His who didn't talk to him for more than half a sentence, and he stopped talking, and left. The rest of the people looked around, most of them followed Yan's his who, and the rest also said goodbye to Zhou's his who. Even if they were still undecided, they only planned to watch, and did not want to offend the king Rong and the magistrate with Zhou's his who. Zhou's his who is Yan's his who's first jinchi in 2 subjects. He obviously has 6 years more qualifications, but he was suppressed by Yan's his who when he was an official in the same family. It can be seen that his ability and insight, how can they follow him? Zhou's his who had always thought highly of himself. When he saw that there were only 2 people left in the room, his face turned black with anger. People who followed Yan's his who asked him for advice. Yan's his who said, "The emperor is a great man. Since he came to the throne, there has been nothing he wanted to do but failed to do. Resetting the business tax is imperative. It's just a matter of time, although Guangdong is poor and remote, but with King Rongjun and Duke Angguo present, it is difficult for the princes in the court to move us, but those who vacillate are more likely to fall." Everyone nodded after hearing this, and said one after another, "We will let the shops pay taxes according to the account books when we go back." Although they have to hand over a lot of money, they are heartbroken, but at least they can keep their official positions, right? Yan's his who nodded slightly, and after saying goodbye to everyone, he returned home first. Before the carriage returned home, Chang Sui whispered, "My lord, there are people in the alley." Yan's his whose complexion changed, and he couldn't help opening the curtain to look into the alley, but the weather was bad today, he was drowsy, and he couldn't see clearly from the depths of the alley. "Did you see clearly?" "I can't see clearly, but the little one heard the movement." Yan's his who knew that the attendant had worked hard and his hearing was much more sensitive than that of ordinary people. He had a sudden change in his heart and had already gone back and forth between Xiao Zai and Qiu's family. He said to the attendant, "Let someone go back and inform servant, lie in ambush over the wall, let's go in and have a look." "My lord, in case of danger." "It's okay, this alley is small, I will stand behind, and I will run if there is any danger." Follower. The mansions in Guangdong are not like the expansion in the north. In addition to the main road, there are wide alleys between the mansions. Most of them are narrow lanes with only 1 or 2 people in the middle, commonly known as small alleys, and no one walks usually. Pass. The roads that normal people don't take are naturally very popular with Xiao Xiao's generation, so when Yan's his who heard that there was movement in his alley, he immediately thought of the bed. And what Yan's his who thought was right, someone really wanted to climb the fence to get in. The tiger head and the little lion had already sat on the top of the wall, and they were telling Xiaoan and the second prince to speed up in a low voice. Xiaoan leaned on the wall and moved up bit by bit. His hands pulled him up to the wall. But Qi Wensu's child was completely helpless. He jumped for a long time but couldn't find the essentials. It's only because Huda usually only took him to climb trees, but didn't take him to dig out the skill of climbing walls. The 4 also knew that the guards behind them were just decorations, and they didn't expect them to help, so the little lion slid down the wall and asked Qi Wensu to stand on his shoulders to climb up, and Hudu and Zioan grabbed his hand and pulled him up. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1046. When Qi Wensu climbed up the wall tremblingly, he turned his head and saw the person entering the alley. He hurriedly shouted, "Brother Lion, hurry up, someone is coming." The guards still stood indifferently, as if they were not the ones who were about to be caught, while the little lion took a few steps back, rushed forward quickly, tapped his toes, and climbed up the wall 3 or 2 times. Under Yan's his whose dumbfounded gaze, he quickly slipped down the wall. Almost when Qi Wensu shouted, Xiaoan grabbed the wall and slid down. The tiger had turned Qi Wensu around. As soon as Xiaoan reached the ground, he took Qi Wensu's hand and put him down, and then pressed his hand against the wall. "Go up," and said, "My belly is against the wall, and my hands are tightly against the wall," and I slid down after that. Qi Wensu let go before Qi Wensu objected, and the second prince who had never climbed the wall yelled and slid against the wall. Going down, he was caught by Xiaoan when he was about to fall backwards. When he opened his eyes, the tiger head and the little lion also quickly slid down the wall with their hands and feet. The guards took a sympathetic look at the shocked Yan's his who, but they didn't follow in. Anyway, there were hidden guards following them. If they also climbed into the backyard of Yan's house, Yan's his who would have to skin them. Yan's his whose heart fell back, and when he turned around and saw the calm look of the guards in the palace, he was furious. You don't know how to stop them. If the young masters fall down, can you bear it? Young masters won't fall off, the guard said categorically. Several young masters have tried countless times on the wall of their own house. How could they fall off? Even if they fall down, they will make cushions. No matter how bad it is, there will be hidden guards, and the trivial matter of climbing the wall will not trouble them. Yan's his who didn't know the inside story, and if he knew, he would be even more angry. Anyway, he was already pointing at them and was so angry that he couldn't speak, so he could only shake his sleeves and leave. Fortunately, the four children moved quickly. Before the mansion had time to ambush, Yan's his who had to go back quickly to stop the servants. In Yan's mansion, the four children were rushing to the backyard together. They didn't know the way, but they had done their homework before they came. They aimed at one direction and walked in. As a result, they saw Yanying before they found the room where Yanying lived. People. Yanying was pulling wicker to fetch water depressedly, but his father ordered him to ground his feet. He was afraid that he would not be able to go out for 3 or 4 days, and he died in the middle of a major event. It was really sad. The sad Yanying drove away all the nurses and girls, and sat on a rock to fetch water with willow branches. However, the wet nurse and girls did not dare to go far. What if the young master fell into the water? So they have to watch. The four children secretly avoided the sight of the nurses and girls, and hit Yanying with a small stone. Yanying was so angry that she looked around for the attacker, and saw the tiger-headed lion cub hiding behind the flowers. He blinked and rubbed in disbelief. Rubbing his eyes, Tiger Tou winked at him and pointed in another direction, telling him to throw him away. Yanying rolled her eyes, nodded slightly, threw away the wicker, turned around and ran towards the direction the tiger had made just now. The nurses and girls were stunned, and hurriedly told the young master to catch up. Yanying was already some distance away from them, and it was a corner if he ran further. Xiaoan hurriedly dragged him to hide in the rockery, successfully avoiding the nurse who was chasing him. The tiger head and the little lion also ran over quickly. Yanying looked at them curiously. How did you get in? We are here to save you, Hu Tou said seriously. Don't ask other questions for now. Little lion, would you like to run for your life with us? Yanying asked excitedly. Is it the type of desperate world, just like in the drama, walking the world with a sword? We're not going to Tianya, Hu Tou said seriously. We're going to my house. Xiaoan urged, just say whether you want it or not. Yanying nodded excitedly, of course I would. Then let's go. Xiaoan asked about the layout of the Yan mansion, and led the way in front, leading a group of children to another wall, and said, your father found us when we came in just now, but they are stupid. They must be looking for us in the yard. Maybe we also left guards under the previous wall, so we won't go out from the previous place, we will go out from here. Yanying looked up along the base of the wall, opened her mouth and said, I don't know how to climb walls. Then can you climb trees? After they chose the location this time, there was a big tree next to the wall, which was easier to climb than the previous wall. Yanying shook his head. The four children despised him together. Yanying was also a little ashamed. He couldn't climb the wall. He decided to learn this skill well in the future, and Yan's his who would cry to death when he found out. Because there was a tree, Qi Wensu didn't need anyone to take him. He just climbed up, climbed to the trunk and sat down, Hutu helped him sit on the wall carefully. Seeing Yan Ying still hugging the tree, he just climbed up. If you don't go up, you can't help but get anxious. The little lion who instructed him to climb the tree was also in a hurry, and whispered to Xiaoan twice, and finally the two took off their coats and tied a knot, and let the tiger head, Qi Wensu and Yan Ying take off their coats, and tied the 5 coats together with the height. The little lion tied up Yan Ying and asked him to grab the clothes, so he crawled towards the wall, and then he and the tiger head grabbed the clothes and pulled Yan Ying towards the wall. Xiaoan is below Yan Ying's support. Yan Ying is no better than Qi Wensu, older than him, and heavier than him, so he is struggling, and Yan Ying is also very frightened when hanging in the air. Fortunately, the strength of the tiger head and the little lion is not fake, although without them the eldest brother is so powerful, but his strength is much stronger than his peers. The two of them worked together to pull Yan Ying up. They didn't stop at all, they turned around and put Yan Ying down the wall. At this time, Yan Zhihu also knew that his son was missing, so he immediately wanted to understand the intentions of the 4 children, and hurriedly asked the servant to look for someone along the fence. He stiffly pulled out a gentle smile, and said, "When you see the young masters, if they are in the mansion, just arrest them directly. Be gentle, don't hurt them. If they are already on the wall, just grab them. Speak softly, don't scare them. If you scare people off, I will only ask you, sir." The servants hurriedly responded and scattered to look for it. Yan Zhihu wiped the sweat off his forehead, and went to look for it with his long followers. He believed Fan Zijian's words now. The actions of the 4 young masters might not be ordered by them. These 4 children are too skinny. Yes, they dared to climb the wall at a young age, and they managed to climb it. He had already seen them on top of the wall, and in a blink of an eye, all 4 children disappeared from the top of the wall. When Yan Zhihu was in a state of confusion, Xiaoan and the others had already brought Yan Ying to the street. Seeing that he really left the house, Yan Ying cheered excitedly, as if he wasn't the one who was so frightened just now. He looked at the 4 little friends with shining eyes, and decided to learn from them well. It was so powerful that it came out as soon as it was said. Yan Ying stared at them and asked, "What are we going to do next?" "Of course I'm going to save other friends, but you can't climb trees, so you'll be waiting for us outside in a while." The 5 children were about to go to the next target, but the guards who couldn't bear to look directly could only remind Yan Zhihu who was running around in the mansion, so Yan Zhihu rushed out of the mansion and shouted at the 5 children, "You want to? Where are you going?" The 4 children scattered like birds and beasts, only Yan Ying was frightened and stayed where he was. The little lion ran 2 steps and saw that he hadn't followed, so he rushed back and grabbed his hand and ran. "You are stupid, why don't you come when your father is here? Run." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1047. When Yan Zhihu was sweating profusely and gathered the 5 children together, the sun was about to set, and he was so tired that he couldn't stand upright, but the 5 children giggled happily, completely treating it as a game of hide and seek, and Yan Zhihu took a bite. The old blood almost spit out. Yan Ying followed the little lion to play hide and seek with his father for a long time, and he was no longer afraid of his father. Seeing that he was so tired that he was beating his legs, he went up to give him a filial rub. "Father, take a rest before catching us." Yan Zhihu moved his hands, but he didn't twist his son's ears to teach him a lesson, but said kindly, "You go home first, your grandmother and mother haven't seen you for a long time, I'm worried about you, I'll send the 4 young masters go back." Yan Ying looked at the friends reluctantly, and asked, "Are you still coming to play with me tomorrow?" Although Xiaoan and the others had a good time running, they did not forget that their original intention was to save people and escape. Seeing that Yan Ying couldn't tell the difference between the enemy and us, they rolled their eyes at him and said, "We are not playing, we are saving you. You went back with your father, and you won't see us in the future." Yan Zhihu saw that they were blatantly alienating their father and son, So angrily he immediately picked up the younger son and stuffed him into the arms of the long follower. Take the young master back quickly, let people watch him, and don't allow him to go into the garden again. You can't even get out of the room, let's see how you sneak away. Yan Ying was stunned for a moment, then she realized that she leaned over and was about to catch the little lion. The long follower hurriedly hugged him and left. Yan Ying howled, "Little lion, save me, save me." Wept miserably. The tiger head was furious and was about to rush over to save people. Yan's his who hurriedly asked his servants to stop him, and persuaded him earnestly, "Young master, I have asked someone to inform the prince, he will be here soon." The tiger jumped up and down, "Then why don't you let Yan Ying go quickly, be careful that my father is coming to beat you up." Yan's his who twitched his lips and said, "Young master, Yan Ying is my son, I will not hurt him, if you want to play with him, come back tomorrow, but you have to go through the gate, and, without our permission, don't take him outside the house." Hutu was stunned, looked at him, then went to look at Yan Ying who was walking away and crying miserably, wondering if he should trust Yan's his who. Yan's his who said helplessly, "Could it be that your father will hurt you?" Tiger shook his head. "That's it, Yan Ying and I, just like your father treats you." Xiaoan stepped forward and grabbed the tiger's head. "Don't believe him, would fourth uncle stuff it for someone else to take you away when you were crying so miserably?" The tiger head who had just been persuaded looked at Yan's his who again. Governor Yan Ji sighed, looked behind the four children, almost bursting into tears, "My lord, you are finally here." The four children hurriedly looked back. Chi Heiran got off his horse, pinched the tiger's head filled with righteous indignation, and asked with a smile, "What's going on here?" Yan's his who was even more angry when he saw the smile on his tiger-headed face, but he knew his identity, so he could only suppress his anger, and said with a smile, "Your Majesty is here. Just right, the four young masters will be handed over to you." Yan's his who wanted to turn around and leave, but when he thought of the result of the discussion with his colleagues today, he breathed a sigh of relief again. He was so confused that he even forgot this important matter, so he turned his head and said to Chi Heiran seriously, "My lord, let the officials send you back." Chi Heiran blinked, and said with a smile, "Don't worry, Lord Yan, I will take good care of them, and I won't let them escape today." Yan's his who twitched his mouth, "Co-authoring your shelf life is only today, but today the sun is about to set, what is the difference between this and a day has passed?" "My lord, I happen to have something to report to Mr. Fan." "Oh, let's go together." Chi Heiran didn't ask the four children what trouble they got into today, and directly carried them back, and dealt with them when they got home. Now it's useless to make people laugh on the street. It was said that he had a discussion with Fan Zijian, but in fact Chi Heiran also participated in it. Yan's his who said that they are willing to take the initiative to pay taxes, but they can only pay for 2 years at most. If there are more people who will die of heartache, he silently gave the list to the two, saying that it will take some time to sort out the accounts, and it will take 3 years at the earliest. 4 days later. However, this was a good situation that Fan Zijian and Chi Heiran didn't expect. He happily promised to protect them, at least not to let them lose their positions in this political storm. Yan's his who breathed a sigh of relief, they were so active, and they couldn't ask for more. Yan's his who agreed with the two about some details and was about to leave. After thinking for a while, he said to the two, "The youngest son of a humble job has been pampered and raised by his mother since he was a child. His body is inevitably a little weak, so I'm afraid he won't be able to accompany the young master well. Let's play." Fan Zijian blinked and didn't understand, but Chi Heiran twitched his lips, realizing that he didn't welcome their children to play with his children. Chi Heiran felt disdainful, "His son is so lively and cute, I don't know how many people want to be with them. It's your son's loss not to play with my sons." With this mentality, Chi Heiran waved his hands and said, "Master Yan, don't worry, I will definitely take care of my children and not let them disturb young Master Yan. Yan's his who heaved a sigh of relief, and hurriedly bowed and retreated. He was afraid that his son would only climb walls and trees if he stayed with the young masters for a long time. However, Yan's his who miscalculated. Even without Xiaoan and the others, his youngest son was obsessed with climbing trees and walls. Every day when he went to work, he took his servants to practice under the wall. And Qi Heiran obviously couldn't be the master of his sons. After he was ordered not to play with Yan Ying again, Qi Heiran asked Xiaoting to stare at them and put his hands aside. The four children brought the four characters of Yang Feng Yin Yin to the extreme. When Qi Heiran said it, they responded well. As soon as Qi Heiran left, they ran around all over the street. However, Xiaoting couldn't always look at them. The four children always can find an opportunity to sneak near Yan's house. After continuous hard work, Yan Ying in the fence finally received a letter from the four children, and slipped under the wall at a certain time on a certain day, so he ordered the boy to build him a ladder, and he climbed to the top. The young master would lean against the wall like the previous 2 days before coming down with a sigh, but this time the young master climbed up the wall, and the servant hurriedly shouted, "Master, you can't climb up, it's dangerous." Under his gaze, Yan Ying not only climbed up the wall, but also slid down the wall, disappearing from sight all at once. The little servant was stunned for a moment, then let out a cry, and climbed up the ladder. When he climbed to the top of the wall, he saw the young master and the four children disappearing from sight. But the little servant breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that the young master didn't fall down. It was so dangerous, so dangerous. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1048. After all, Yan's his who didn't stop his youngest son from interacting with Xiaoan and the others, and he had never seen this child insist on anything before, but this time he seemed to be possessed by a demon. He insisted on becoming a small partner with Xiaoan and the others. No matter how much he coerced and lured him, it was useless. While the old lady at home was staring at him, it was not easy for him to beat him. The key is that Yan Ying was the youngest son, and he was in pain too. How dare he stop him from going out? What if the youngest son stays outside and never comes back? Yan's his who turned a blind eye to let them become good friends. On the side of the palace, Mu Yangling saw a few children running to the academy as soon as they finished school, and even when they were resting, apart from going shopping, most of them slipped to the academy to find someone to play with, causing the husband to come to his house. There is no way. The palace rests once every 5 days, but the academy rests once every 10 days, so when the four children go to the academy, they are still in class. They either sneak into the academy to study together or play outside. The former is fine. It is also very proud to be able to teach the little princes of the palace, but the latter directly seduces the children to look out, unable to read at all. Mu Yangling thought for a while. The four children were just being naughty, and it would be good to have more friends to study and play together at this time, so he planned to send them to the academy to experience it. Go and try it first. If you like it, you can study in the academy in the future. If you don't like it, come back. Qi Heiran felt that Mu Yangling spoiled the children too much, and said, "They are not young anymore, they should be strict. How can they always be so indulgent?" Mu Yangling said with a smile, "Don't worry, whether they are at home or in the academy, they must learn what they should learn, and they will not be given a chance to slack off. You see, they are so noisy these days, but they still have to go to class, and the homework that should be done must be completed." Qi Heiran has no big opinion. "What about me?" Little Bear raised his hand and asked, "Daddy, do I want to go to the academy too?" "You don't have to go, I still have to teach you Kung Fu, How can I teach you after you go to the academy? Xiaoxiang was a little disappointed. After Xiaobao left, he was the only one listening to the teacher's lectures. The younger brothers were all too young, and their courses were different from his. Mu Yangling patted his head when he saw him, and asked Qi Heiran after soaking his feet at night, "Aren't you going to the academy to study in the future? Where did you find the time to learn Kung Fu?" Qi Heiran said proudly, "Master is very talented, even if he just practiced martial arts in his spare time, he can still practice it. Isn't it skipping class?" Qi Heiran touched his nose and argued, "Then I learned what I should have learned." Mu Yangling leaned carefully on the pillow, exhaled, and asked, "How much time does Little Bear practice martial arts now compare with when you were young?" Of course, Little Bear has more time, otherwise how could he have achieved something at such a young age? Qi Heiran was startled when he said this, looked at Mu Yangling, and asked, "Do you want him to go to the academy?" In the past 6 months, Xiaoxiang has been busy with his schoolwork and martial arts. He also went to inspect his sea and workshop during his rest. He didn't even have time to play with his younger brothers. After Xiaobao left, this kid has been pushing himself very hard. It's tight, he is still young after all, we are not people who will die early, there is no need to force the child so much, so I want him to go to the academy to relax, and make more friends. Qi Heiran recalled that he did meet many friends through the academy when he was a child. He hesitated and said, "But the academy is closed for 10 days, and the learning tasks are also heavy, so will the little bear be happy when he goes there?" Believe it or not, even if the schoolwork is heavy, it won't be a problem for Little Bear, Mu Yangling said confidently. "Do you really think our Little Bear is that stupid? In terms of quality and ability to resist pressure, he is no worse than those poor students. The students who study are poor." Qi Heiran didn't immediately agree. Xiaoxiang is the son of the royal family, he has a plan for his son's studies. What Xiaoxiang wants to learn is not just the 4 books and 5 classics, but the 7 arts, because in the future he will inherit the palace and lead Xiaobao's army. Martial arts and the art of war must not be neglected, and now Xiaoxiang has started to study the art of war systematically. If he goes to the academy, the course will definitely slow down, because he cannot take up his time in the academy, but if he is at home, he will devote himself to practicing martial arts and learning the art of war in the afternoon. But what Aling said is right, even if he trains the little bear to be an all-rounder in civil and military affairs in the future, what's the use of being unhappy? It's important for his son to be well versed in civil and military affairs, but isn't it more important to be happy? He thought so, but Qi Heiran still couldn't bear it. He was very excited when he thought about his son's poetry, book collection, and medical knowledge in the future. Qi Heiran struggled all night, and the next day he went to sword practice with some dark circles under his eyes. When he first arrived at the martial arts hall, he saw Little Bear standing upright. Qi Heiran paused. The heartstrings loosened at once. Those expectations from last night slowly dissipated, and the corners of Qi Heiran's mouth curled up slightly. He felt that his thoughts last night were just a joke. Did Qi Heiran's son still deliberately learn Ki? Naturally, he was so happy. Qi Heiran waved at Little Bear, and Little Bear stopped and jumped off the pile. "Daddy." Qi Heiran patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Last night, I discussed with your mother. If you want to go to the academy, we will send you there. You are still young, and you can slow down your progress in martial arts. Let it go, anyway, your foundation has been laid, as long as it doesn't go to waste in the future." Little Bear's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help jumping on his father's back, and gave him a big kiss on the cheek. "Thank you, Daddy." Qi Heiran blushed. Xiaoxiang stopped being with his parents since he was 6 years old, and now he is 9 years old, but he suddenly felt his face burn. Little Bear cheered and jumped away. He decided to tell his brothers the good news, and he didn't even practice Kung Fu. Although it's not the beginning of school, It's still very easy for Xiaoxiang and the others to join the class, and many academies in Guangzhou welcome it. In the end, if Mu Yangling chose the academy where Yan Ying was. Most of this academy is the children of officials and those who are farming and studying. The poor children who can come in have excellent grades. Mu Yangling arranged for 5 children to join the class. After passing the exam, the twins and Qi Wensu were assigned to the big class of the Enlightenment class, which was in the same class as Yan Ying, while Xiaoan was assigned to Xiaoxiang, who was 3 children and 2 classes higher. Twin. Little bear. Only the kid Qi Wensu looked at Xiaoan with admiration. Xiaoan sighed, and said, I'm already in control. I didn't expect to be separated with you guys, but with brother Xiang, obviously I have already emptied a lot of questions. Bear /U0026 twins. Qi Wensu continued to stare at Xiaoan. Xiao Xia also looked at her son proudly. Mu Yangling touched his head left and right, and finally came to a conclusion, obviously the tiger's head and the little lion's head are bigger than yours. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1049. After envy and envy, Mu Yangling asked the academy to give Xiaoan a test again, and she said to Xiaoan seriously, I know you are smart, and I know that you want to play with your younger brothers, but you will eventually separate in the future, not now, and also in the future, you can no longer be together all the time like now. It is not fair to yourself to suppress your talents in order to be able to play together and let yourself continue to take the lessons you have already mastered. Xiaoan lowered his head and said nothing. Mu Yangling sighed, embraced him and said, Fourth aunt knows that Xiaoan is a loving child, but it doesn't mean that you will be separated forever, but it's just that you are not in the same class. Class is over. You still played together when you were in the shower, that is, when you grow up, you will work on different sides of the world, and you will also exchange letters, just like you and the prince's brother now, although you don't meet each other, you can communicate by letter and keep in touch with relatives. Xiaoan still hung his head and said nothing, but Mu Yangling didn't know what to do. Xiaoan is different from the little lion with the tiger head. Because of his weak body and intelligence, this child has always been more careful in his mind and has very delicate feelings. When we are together, we can say anything, but when we are alone with adults, we keep our mouths shut when we talk about ourselves. But the 3 children can't be together forever. Hutu and the little lion have to learn to make up their own minds. They can't rely on Xiaoan for everything, and Xiaoan also has to learn to speak their minds, and can't always order the little lion and Hutu to do things. Spokesperson. Mu Yangling held Xiaoan's head and patted his back gently, waiting for him to open his heart. It may be that Mu Yangling's comforting effect, or it may be that this posture made him feel safe. Xiaoan murmured, I just like to play with my younger brothers, fourth aunt, I also like to play with brother bear, I am not. Did you get into the same class as brother little bear? That's because Xiaoxiang tried his best to pass the exam, but you didn't even use your strength. Your ability is not limited to this. Xiaoan, you have to know that in the future you will take the imperial examination, and your cousins will take the martial arts. You can't always look up to them. It's like a tiger head practicing martial arts with a little lion. They are targeting the little bear, not you. Mu Yangling said to him seriously, you should do the same. You are better than the little bear. They are much more powerful. There is no need to stop and wait for them, it will drag you down. Speaking of this, Mu Yangling, who has always been optimistic, couldn't help but feel ashamed. In fact, in the cultural class, her sons were not a star behind Xiaoan. In other words, she was also a top student in school back then, and learning was very important to her. It's so easy, why didn't her children inherit her IQ at all? Mu Yangling decisively put the responsibility on Qi Heiran. Xiaoan Zayawai, he understood all the truths Mu Yangling said, but he was still reluctant. Seeing him standing stiffly in front of him, Mu Yangling could only give up persuasion temporarily, and planned to do his work slowly. But the next day, Fan Zijin rushed in angrily to look for her. Chi Heiran saw that he was so angry at Mu Yangling, jumped up and stopped in front of Mu Yangling, and said with a smile, "Cousin, why are you here? All right, have you had breakfast yet?" Seeing him and Sini, Fan Zijin's face became even more ugly. "Get out of the way, don't get in the way." Chi Heiran stood in front of Mu Yangling and looked at him begging for mercy. "I know, I must have done something wrong again, tell me later, I will definitely change." When did Chi Heiran plead guilty so quickly? Isn't he afraid of conflict between him and Mu Yangling? Fan Zijin not only didn't calm down, but became even more angry. "You protect your wife, why don't you know how to protect my son? She has only known you for how many years, but we have been playing together since we were born. We are indeed bastards who value sex over friends." Chi Heiran is also sweating profusely. I don't know what a Ling did to make him so angry. His brain is running fast. In the past 2 days, a Ling hasn't said anything special to him. After enrolling in school, do you need to prepare some of the 4 treasures of the study again, and then worry about the children making friends and making trouble? I didn't see any mention of Zijin. Fan Zijin didn't have time to talk nonsense with him, so he stretched out his hand and pushed him aside. He didn't push him once, and he still didn't move no matter how hard he tried. Fan Zijin puffed up his face and was about to stretch out his feet to kick him, but Mu Yangling stretched out his hand to push Chi Heiran aside. She went because she was also curious about what happened to Fan Zijin, and she swore that she hadn't messed with Fan Zijin recently. Fan Zijin stared at Mu Yangling's hand and stopped talking. Chi Heiran jumped. "Aling, I'm protecting you, why are you pushing me?" Mu Yangling ignored him, looked at Fan Zijin sincerely and asked, "Zijin, what's wrong with you? If I do something wrong, tell me, I'll change it, why are you so angry?" Chi Heiran inexplicably felt that the sentence was very harsh. Fan Zijin calmed down a bit, and asked with a straight face, "Why don't you allow Xiaoan to play with Hudu and the others?" Ah, Mu Yangling suddenly understood, and quickly explained to him that she didn't stop the children from playing together, but she just felt that Xiaoan's level was too high and she needed to go to a big class. Fan Zijin's complexion gradually calmed down. Last night Xiaoan went back dejectedly, and asked him nothing, but Xia only told him that Xiaoan's grades in the exam were very good, almost as good as Xiaoxiang. But knowing the son is more like the father, he has always guided Xiaoan's homework. His son's ability, not to mention a little bear, may not be able to catch up with him. How could it be possible that the test scores are only here for the little bear? Fan Zijin only thought that his son was out of order in the exam, and was frustrated because his grades did not meet the goals he set, but he didn't take it to heart. Who hasn't encountered setbacks in exams? Just get some sleep. So he went to see his son early the next morning, only to see him crying under the quilt. His eyes were red and swollen. When he asked, his son actually said, "My aunt won't let me play with my tiger-headed brothers, Daddy, I want to go to class and play with my brothers." Fan Zijin was so angry that his heart ached. How could Mu Yangling be so unreasonable? The relationship between Xiaoan and the twins is the same as that between him and Chi Heiran when he was a child. Thinking about when Chi Feng wanted to separate their cousins when they were young, they were so sad that their intestines were about to break. In the end, Heiran beat his 2 cousins together. It was almost a month before Chi Feng gave up that idea and let them go to school and play together. Unexpectedly, Mu Yangling has now become as hateful as Chi Feng. Without even thinking about it, Fan Zijin rushed over to settle accounts with Mu Yangling. But now after listening to Mu Yangling's explanation, Fan Zijin couldn't help becoming silent. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 1050. His son is naturally a stunning and talented person. Although Xiaoan is studying at home, he sits in the same classroom as the twins, but the teaching progress is different. Hutu and Little Lion have always been in the soy sauce stage. Mr. Chien is not strict with their academic requirements, but it is different for Xiaoan. He is given special care. It is precisely because of the emphasis that Xiaoan can help Mr. Chien take the 3 younger children so they can live in the same classroom in peace. Obviously going to the academy is different. Fan Zijin couldn't help but think about it. If his mother asked him to study separately from Heiran on the grounds that he would not delay his study, would he be willing? The answer would naturally be no. By the way, his son is not yet 7 years old, so why is he in such a hurry to enter the senior year? If he is bullied, who will beat him back? In the elementary class, they are all the same age anyway, with a tiger head and a little lion, who dares to bully his son? But it is also very important to be the number 1 scholar. Now that his son can sit in the same class as 13 or 14-year-old children, wouldn't he be able to take the number 1 examination at the age of 15 or 16? Fan Zijin was tangled. Chi Heiran patted his chest and said rejoicingly, "How big of a deal is this that deserves such arguing?" He thought something big had happened. Xiaoan is so happy to come here. If he wants to be a young man, he will focus on the imperial examination, but I don't think it is necessary. For a family like ours, if he inherits the title in the future, it is naturally good to be a young man. It doesn't matter, Chi Heiran said seriously. If he is on the imperial examination, he will only come and go with those few books, smarter than the tiger-headed little lion, then learn more about the things he is interested in, and read more books. Why do you have to skip a grade? Chi Heiran is very open about this kind of thing. He is a 6 or 7-year-old kid studying with a group of 13 or 14-year-old boys. Not to mention being bullied, he has just a lot of psychological pressure. Don't look at him as smart. He looks like a genius, seeing how mischievous he is with the tiger-headed lion cub. He is still a child. If he is really thrown among a group of older kids, he might not be used to it. Fan Zijin clapped his hands happily. That's it? Chi Heiran enviously said, studying so easily is also a great thing in life. Why do we have to let him study nervously? Think about him. When he stayed up all night when he was studying, he couldn't catch up with Zijin. Zijin copied his homework, and Zijin had to remind him in a low voice when he was reciting, and Zijin had to pass small notes to him during the exam. It would be fine if Zijin worked hard, but when he was stuttering and reciting, Zijin had already lost his textbook to practice calligraphy. When Jin was doing homework, Zijin was studying the endgame with a chess record, and when he went out to play, Zijin was also playing, and when he was practicing martial arts, Zijin was sleeping. To be honest, if Zijin wasn't his good brother, he would have killed him when he was studying. Studying is too easy. Why should he be a student who is exhausted but still wandering in the middle? But Xiaoan went too far than Zijin. Zijin had to recite the book at least 4 or 5 times, and Xiaoan had to read it once and then memorize it. To understand a text, Zijin had to search for his teacher's handouts or read Shuowenjizi, while Xiaoan memorized Shuowenjizi, looked at the textbook, and then read related books. The questions raised can stump Mr. Chien, who was born in Juran. Why should such a relaxed student life be broken? He may not be able to get such a good brain in 10 reincarnations. Since it is his turn, he should cherish it. If he can't enjoy himself, why should he rush to seek abuse? Fan Zijin nodded in agreement at first, but turned around and left when he heard the latter. How could his son be so unambitious? Since those courses are not difficult for him, then he can learn new things by reviewing the past, and he can also study the 7 arts in depth. The courses arranged by the academy for the students are based on the 6 arts. The medical arts have long been eliminated due to the changes of the times, but Xiao Xiong and the others will go to the battlefield in the future. It is not harmful to know a little medical knowledge. Xiaoan can learn it in depth. Because the imperial examinations became more and more popular, although the academy still offered 6 arts courses, The emphasis was much lower than before. They only taught some simple ones, and whether to study in depth depended on the student's choice and family background. The 6 arts are not easy to learn, it takes a lot of time, energy, and money. Even as the little bear raised by the eldest son, Chi-Heiran didn't plan to let him study in depth. Except for Li Shi, it is enough to know a little about the rest, it depends on his own interests. And Xiaoan obviously belongs to someone who has a lot of time, energy, and money. Chi-Heiran rubbed his chin and thought, if Xiaoan really spends time with the tiger-headed little lion and the others in the enlightenment class, maybe he can really master the 6 arts. After all, then the learning speed of the 2 boys is really not flattering. Mu Yangling obviously thought of this too. She looked up and saw that Fan Zijin was about to walk out the door, and hurriedly shouted, Zijin, why don't we hire another doctor who teaches medicine for Xiaoan to see if he is interested? If so, just let's learn all the 7 arts. Fan Zijin turned his head and looked at Mu Yangling with Chi-Heiran contemptuously. Mu Yangling asked in a daze, what's wrong, did I say something wrong? Chi-Heiran shook his head and sighed, I heard Li Shun say that she was pregnant for 3 years and was stupid. I never believed it, but now I believe it. Does Xiaoan need to hire someone if she wants to study medicine? Don't we have an imperial doctor at home? Mu Yangling was embarrassed, she really didn't think of Wang Tai. As soon as Fan Zijin left, Chi-Heiran leaned closer to Mu Yangling and looked at it seriously, before nodding for a while, it looks a little silly. Mu Yangling stretched out his hand to push him away, Chi-Heiran laughed loudly, and said to Mu Yangling, okay, you can leave this matter alone, let the children go if they don't want to be separated, they are together anyway, no one can bully them. Xiaoan is in IQ matters, Tiger Head and Little Lion are in fights, and Wensu will be a good fighter in 2 years. The more Chi-Heiran talked, the more he felt that it was the same thing, and he couldn't help but smash his mouth. The combination of the 4 of them is simply a bully, and we don't have to worry about them being bullied in the academy in the future. Mu Yangling said, even if they don't get together, no one would dare to bully them based on their identities. That's not necessarily the case, Chi-Heiran said, there are always calculations, no matter how tall they stand, they can't avoid it, and there are always a few stunned youths in the world, they don't act according to their status. If Xiaoan is beaten, what should I do? He is weak, even if Cub can get back to the field later, he will be bullied. Chi-Heiran existed like this in the academy back then, so he had a lot of experience. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1051. The children in the family were sent to the academy in a swarm, and the 2 houses calmed down immediately. There were no children who often caused troubles. When Mu Yangling took a nap, he slept until the sun fell to the west. He became fat in just 2 weeks. In a circle. Before Mu Yangling was pregnant, she only had a bulging belly, her hands and feet were still as thin as before, and she didn't even have a fat face, but this time, maybe her heart was wide and her body was fat. Not only her hands and feet became thicker, but her face was also fat. Chi-Heiran couldn't lose weight after the child was finished, but he was very happy when he saw it, and rubbed her hands and said, I used to think you were too thin, but now it's just right. Dr. Wang said that fat people live longer. When did Dr. Wang say that? Anyway, he said, you should eat more and gain weight. Mu Yangling didn't argue with him either, but her appetite was indeed good. Considering that the due date was only a few days away, she wasn't afraid of overdoing it. She ate when she wanted, but the time for walking every day was slowly increasing. Mu Yangling was still taking a nap when the labor pains came, and she was still a little dazed, but felt a throbbing pain in her stomach, and when she woke up, the labor pains were even worse. Mu Yangling opened the curtain, and when Lishun saw the movement, he hurried forward with a smile. "Mother, why did you wake up so early today? I'm about to give birth, you go and call Wang Tai and Wenpo." Lichun was stunned, and when he realized it, he immediately stepped forward to help Mu Yangling up and leaned against him, then turned around and went out, loudly asking someone to go to the Navy Yamen to invite the prince back, and at the same time ordering someone to find Wang Tai, while asking someone to go to the side the courtyard will invite the stable lady who arranged half a month ago, and let the fire boil the water, and prepare the blood and chi soup. After the arrangements are made, Wang Ma has already entered the house to help Mu Yangling out and send it to the side room. I went to the delivery room. Although Lishun has been following Mu Yangling, she has never been married, let alone gave birth to a child. She can only arrange things outside, and the delivery room is left to Wang Ma and Guyu, who rushed over. Fortunately, those who followed Mu Yangling were all from Lingnan to serve them all the way, and they already had experience once, so they came in and out in a calm manner at this time. When Chi Heiran received the news and ran back out of breath, Mu Yangling was eating a bowl of egg noodles. Chi Heiran asked profusely, "Aling, are you okay?" Mu Yangling shook his head. "It was hurting just now, but it's gone now, and the amniotic fluid hasn't broken. Grandma Wen said that I have to wait for a while. I'll eat enough first so I can work hard." "Okay, you eat a little more. If you don't have enough, let the small kitchen make it," Chi Heiran said incoherently. "Do you just want to eat noodles? Do you want to eat other things? Is there anything the two children like to eat? I will go get them." Mu Yangling saw that his face turned pale and the sweat was still dripping down, so he gave him a comforting smile and pushed him away. "Okay, I'm fine, I've seen the Dr. Wang and Mrs. Wen this time. Duhan, nothing will happen. Maybe if you drink a cup of tea, a baby will be born on my side." Chi Heiran forced a smile, and nodded with a smile. "You are right, this baby must be safe and sound, and it was born with a cup of tea." The steady woman who was standing by the side couldn't help but lower her head and smile. It was rumored that the prince has a deep affection for the princess. Now it seems that it is true. Although a woman gave birth, she stepped into the gate of hell, but she was the first one whose male master was as confused as the prince. See you next time. Mu Yangling talked with Chi Heiran for a while, and when he felt the amniotic fluid was broken, he let him out, and comforted him with a smile. "I even gave birth to the two naughty little lions with tiger heads, so why can't I give birth to these two? Go out quickly, drink a cup of tea to decompress, maybe the baby will be born before dinner." Chi Heiran responded with a lot of voices, but after he went out, he lay down on the window listening to the movement. When Fan Zijian and Xiao Xia came over, they saw him sticking to the window with sweat profusely. His face turned pale. Fan Zijian's heart tightened, thinking of Mu Yangling's difficulty in giving birth to a tiger-headed lion cub. He hurriedly asked, "How Ran, Aling had a difficult delivery?" Chi Heiran said displeasedly, "Cousin, what nonsense are you talking about? Aling is fine, she will be safe, and so will the child." Yes, Aling will definitely be able to give birth safely." Xiao Xia couldn't help but glance at her husband, grabbed his hand and said in a low voice, "Aling is giving birth inside, how can you talk like that? Wasn't he scared by Heiran? Mu Yangling is fine, what's the matter with his pale face and profuse sweat?" But Fan Zijian also knew that this was not the time to distinguish, so he simply admitted his mistake. "Yes, I'm talking nonsense, don't take it to heart. What did the imperial doctor say?" Chi Heiran was displeased again. "Aling is fine, why did he see the imperial physician?" "Well, everything he says now is wrong." Fan Zijian shut his mouth decisively. Xiao Xia hurriedly answered, "Fourth uncle, what does Wenpo say? Has Aling eaten? Giving birth requires a lot of effort." Chi Heiran sighed, and said, "After eating a bowl of noodles, she won't let me stay inside, and now I don't know if the pain is serious, the amniotic fluid has already broken." Xiao Xia comforted him and said, "It will be soon, let's sit down and have a cup of tea first, maybe Aling will be born in less than a cup of tea." Chi Heiran only thought that Xiao Xia was comforting him. The tiger head and the little lion had tossed and tossed for a day and a night last time, but it was a good word, and Chi Heiran agreed. Fan Zijin saw that he turned around and went to guard the window again, and couldn't help twitching the corners of his mouth, because Mu Yangling had a difficult delivery once, and he didn't dare to drag Chi Heiran to the study to sit and wait, so he could only drag Xiao Xia to the stone bench beside him wait. Fan Zijin was ready to fight a protracted battle, so he asked people to prepare tea and snacks. Who knew that in less than a cup of tea, a short but loud cry of a child came from inside. Fan Zijin was stunned for a moment, he didn't even notice the tea in his hand spilled out. Chi Heiran even sat down on the ground, and then was ecstatic, ran to the door and almost rushed in. Guyu opened the curtain and came out, happily said, "Congratulations, my lord, the Wangfei has added a little lord." Chi Heiran was slightly taken aback, and then happily said, okay, Fei Bai, ask someone to hang a small bell. Although I feel a little disappointed that I am not a daughter, my son is also good, and he can share a little for his brothers. Chi Heiran continued to look inside expectantly, and asked, "What is the second one?" Guyu was happy, "My lord is too anxious, the second one hasn't been born yet." "How is the princess?" "Your Majesty, don't worry, your Majesty is fine." It was because Guyu was so happy that she came out to report. In the room, Mu Yangling drank a bowl of ginseng soup, took a deep breath, felt the movement in his stomach, lay down again, and continued to give birth following the guidance of Wenpo. In less than a quarter of an hour, she gave birth to another daughter. This time the delivery was extremely smooth, just like when the bear was born, and it was over without any difficulties. When Xiaoxiang and the others came back from school, they added a pair of younger siblings. Chi Heiran was happily watching the pair of children, which was extremely rare. "Aling, did your ancestors often have twins? Do you think we will have twins if we have another child?" Mu Yangling in the room had already fallen asleep drowsily, and answered in a daze, not knowing what he was answering at all. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1052. Several children were very interested in the little doll. After comparing the two children for a long time, they came to the conclusion, the younger sister is no different from the younger brother. They are both red and wrinkled, and they don't look good at all. Xiaoan nodded approvingly, "It's the same as my younger brother when he was a child." So the four children dispersed after a while, but Xiaoxiang and Xiaofu stayed behind. Xiaoxiang thinks that as the eldest brother, he should take care of his younger siblings, but Xiaofu is really interested. It was the first time he saw children younger than him lying on the edge of the cradle and carefully stretching out his fingers to touch them. Mu Yangling drank a bowl of soup and sighed, "These two can only play with Xiaofu from now on." Xiao Xia laughed and said, "Xiaoan and the others dislike them for being small, and they are usually impatient with Xiaofu. The kitchen just fried chestnuts a while ago, and I asked them to take Xiaofu to play." Xiaoan got impatient, so she peeled a handful of chestnuts for Xiaofu. "Eat, build a house with Hutu and the others to play, fortunately there is a maid and woman watching, otherwise a handful of chestnuts will not choke and lose your appetite." Children like to play with older children, but Xiaofu likes to be younger than himself. Xiao Xia looked at his youngest son, shook his head and smiled, "It's because his brothers didn't take him to play, and he usually stumbles and runs behind their buttocks, but he is left behind 5 times out of 10, I feel so pitiful tight." Mu Yangling also couldn't help laughing when he thought of the scene where Xiaofu was running around behind the 4 brothers' buttocks. With younger brothers and sisters, Xiaofu seems to have found a new toy, and he no longer runs behind his brothers. Sometimes Xiaoan comes to take him out to play, but Xiaofu hugs the bedpost and does not let go, which makes Mu Yangling and Xiaoxia's big brother laugh it out. Xiaoan couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, feeling that his younger brother didn't play with him anymore. When the two children were full moon, they became whiter and tenderer, and their eyes rolled around, and Xiao Fu stopped going out with Xiaoan and the others. Mu Yangling said that they didn't bring his younger brother to play, and lost his brother's heart. Hutu found a reason and said, "It's cold outside, brother Xiaofu is afraid of the cold and doesn't want to go out. It is now November, the cold wind is howling in Guangdong, and the mountains in the north are covered with heavy snow." Mu Yangling looked outside and saw the north wind blowing loudly, so he worried, "I sent it to your grandfather's family. I don't know if the New Year's ceremony has arrived." Chi Heiran opened the curtain against the cold wind and came in. He stomped his feet at the door, took off his coat and handed it to the servants, and warmed up the fire again. He felt that the cold on his body was almost gone before entering the inner room. Hearing this, he said, "It's almost time, even if the snow in the north is heavy, it will be almost a month." As soon as the two children were born, Chi Heiran excitedly reported to the capital and seeing Zhou Mansion, knowing that winter was coming and the road to the north would be difficult, so he simply sent the New Year's gift together, and now the time is coming soon. This year is very cold. There are reports of disasters in the north and northwest. The imperial court is already preparing disaster relief. My father-in-law is the commander-in-chief of the north. He has to lead people to help the local government clear the heavy snow and build wooden houses. He must be busy. If you want to receive their letter, we'll probably have to wait until the Chinese New Year. Chi Heiran comforted her and said, "If you feel homesick, I will write another letter and ask the post station to send it to the official route." "No," Mu Yangling stopped him, "I don't have anything important to say to them. I just added a child and want to report to them, so let's wait later." Mu Yangling knows the post station system in this world. It is delivered one by people on horseback. Ordinary post stations are fine, even though it is cold, windy and hot. In the last break, official posts, especially urgent official documents, are all for speed and do not guarantee human life. Every year, several servants die in each post station. It's not an important letter, there is no need to use these resources, and it will kill people for nothing. Chi Heiran was vaguely aware of her concerns, so he shook her hand. Mu Yangling looked at a group of children sitting on the blankets and playing, and sighed, "It's been a few years since the weather went well, and the weather started to turn bad again. I don't know what the next year will be like." Chi Heiran is very confident. Fortunately, the national treasury is full now, disaster relief is not a problem, and there are high-yield grains. No matter how bad it is, it will not go bad. This year's tariffs are a lot better. I went to the Shivo department for a visit today. Mr. Liu said that this year's tariffs may account for 20% of the national treasury, which is comparable to the salt tax. In addition to the grain tax and supplementary tax received this year, the national treasury is at least 30% richer than in previous years. Although Chi Heiran didn't say it clearly, his expression showed that although there were natural disasters this winter, he would not be very sad. 2 months earlier, Qin Tianjian said that this year is afraid of heavy snow. Government offices everywhere have made preparations, and the houses in the slums have been reinforced. Didn't your newspaper spread the news widely? Everyone is prepared. Chi Heiran saw that Mu Yangling was always frowning, so he comforted her. "Father-in-law must have made preparations, maybe next month we will receive the letter from Mu's family on time." But in fact, the letter from Mu's family arrived within 2 days. Along with the letter, there were 3 carts of things that they had prepared for the newborn and the little bear. The people who escorted the things were servants of the Mu family and disabled soldiers retired from the army. The things were sent in September, but they had been on the road for 2 months because the roads in the Northland were too difficult to walk, and they were almost blocked. 1 month, and on the way, they also encountered a convoy of New Year gifts from the palace. It is said that they are still stuck on the road. Lu Wu drank a bowl of hot soup, and sat on a stool awkwardly and said to Mu Yangling, "This year, the snow was too heavy. Do you still remember the heavy snow that year when we escaped from the village? It was worse than that, Ju. In the first 10 days of the month, the day before was fine, but the sky was cloudy, and there was a bit of wind in the evening. In the middle of the night, the snow fell with a slap, just like someone sprinkled chicken feathers in the sky. We covered a quilt and it was frozen alive. When I woke up, the Kong at home was turned on, and there was enough firewood. Everyone lived a good life these years, and every family had a few quilts, so that they would not freeze to death. After investigation, 6 frozen corpses were found. Lu Wu is from the Lu family, so Mu Yangling would have called him uncle, but the blood relationship has faded, because he was brought home by Mu Shi to help the Mu family manage the farm. This time it was difficult on the road. Let's go, Mu Shi didn't have anyone available to send him here. Lu Wu was a little nervous towards Mu Yangling. After all, he hadn't seen each other for more than 10 years. The last time I saw Mu Yangling, she was a little girl who often carried prey to Uncle Liu's house, but now she is a noble princess. Mu Yangling didn't expect the snow disaster in the Northland to be so serious, and she felt a little uneasy. She asked, "We are all like this, so isn't the Golden Man's side even worse?" "No, I heard that countless cattle and sheep froze to death, and many of them fled to Daki if they couldn't survive." This time, Dajin didn't stop him, and let the refugees come over.